Okay, welcome everyone to Amplifying Our Voices through Black Diasporic Poetry. This is our last event for the Lift Every Voice grant events. Again, this grant was made possible by the funding from the Lift Every Voice grant from the Library of America, won by myself, Amanda Marie Leftwich, and Dr. Fran Lassiter for events related to Black poetry until now. So this event was designed to bring cultural awareness of Black poetry, but also to facilitate an ongoing dialogue to diversity and inclusivity. Following the reading, the audience will be encouraged to ask questions. And now I will turn it over to Fran.
Good afternoon and welcome to our final event, as Amanda has said. I want to introduce our poets tonight. We are very honored to have with us Trapeta Mayson as well as David Gaines. I'm going to read you their biographies and then I'm going to ask both of them a question before we have the pleasure of hearing their readings. Trapeta B. Mayson is the 2020-2021 Philadelphia Poet Laureate. She's a recipient of a Pew Fellowship in Literature, Leeway Transformation Award, Leeway Art and Change Grant, and Pennsylvania Council on the Arts Grant. Her work was also nominated for a 2016 Pushcart Prize. Mayson is a Cavcavum and Callaloo Fellow and a 2019 Aspen Words Emerging Writers Fellow with the Aspen Institute. She is the author of She Was Once Herself and Mocha Melodies. Mayson also released two music and poetry projects, Scat and This Is How We Get Through, in collaboration with internationally acclaimed jazz guitarist Monette Sudler. Her other publications include submissions in the American Poetry Review, Epiphany Literary Journal, Aesthetica Magazine, Margie, the American Journal of Poetry, among others. Mayson is a native of Liberia. She is a graduate of Temple University, Bryn Mawr Graduate School of Social Work and Social Research, and Villanova University School of Business. Currently working in the social services field, Mayson is a member of several local organizations where she uses the arts to mobilize, build community, and create change. David Gaines, also known as David G., is a Black poet, performer, and actor born and raised in Uptown Philadelphia. His work examines Blackness, masculinity, Christianity, and mental health through an intersectional lens. In 2018, he won multiple championship titles, including 2017 College Union's Poetry Slam Invitational Champion, 2018 Philly Pigeon Champion, and ranked fourth in the nation in the 2018 Individual World Poetry Slam. In 2020, he became the Poet Laureate of Pennsylvania's Montgomery County. Dave's work has been featured in the National Black Arts Festival, Was Good Magazine, Right About Now, Vice Media, among others. He also loves puns, yo-yos, and is very enthusiastic about pickles. You can follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Dave G Poetry or visit his website, www.davegpoetry.com. Now, before we have these two esteemed guests read their poems, I want to ask both of them a question, and I'm going to start with Tripetta. And the question is, based on the poems that you're going to be reading for us tonight, what is the inspiration for these poems? Give us some sense of your muse, your writing process, but just give us a sense briefly before we start actually having you read the poems for us, please.
Oh, thank you, Fran. For me, the writing process is one of urgency at times, and sometimes it is comes slow and bothersome, meaning that a poem could be sticking with you for days and weeks at a time, and you just want to kind of get it out of you. Other times it is really urgent. So for me, I just really try to expose what I call urgent stories or important stories, even the ones that people think are not important, the everyday people, immigrant experiences, Blackness and from a global perspective, but in a very local perspective. So you'll hear elements of that. So if I'm writing from, an immigrant young woman trying to come to America to a young boy growing up in North Philly, um, to family struggles, to struggles with mental health, very similar to David. You know, I'm writing about a number of different topics and subjects from my perspective, but they're urgent. I make space for them because writing for me is therapeutic, as well as so many other things. So you'll
Okay.
be hearing old, new, you know, old things tonight in a couple pieces that I'm going to share.
Okay. Thank you. Same question, David.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Fran. Like Trapeta, inspiration really can come from anywhere, and it takes a bunch of different forms for me. I'd say if I had to boil boil it down, I've just always been a sort of curious person. So a lot of my work is inspired by questions, which has gotten me in trouble, considering I grew up in a very traditional sort of Baptist
Mm,
household where, questions were seen as threats. But, generally, I was just always been fascinated um, with with asking questions. So when I write poems, and really when I create any sort of art, I am attempting to answer those questions. Um,
mm.
and very rarely, I'd say, I don't think I've ever really arrived at any sort of answer. But there is something beautiful about the asking itself, and I think that's what keeps me coming back every time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to Trapeta, who will give us a reading this evening.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. David, I'm honored to read with you. You've accomplished a lot, and I'm really proud to share this stage with you. So I'm going to share a couple pieces, and the first one I'm going to share right now is a poem that's relatively newer, and it's called "Poem to My 20-Year-Old Self." There's an epigram in the beginning of the poem. It's a Bob Marley and the Wailers tune, and it's there she goes with the pieces from my heart. Your mother had you at this same age. She and your father adored all their offsprings. Well, you are Gama's daughter indeed. Gama, Bassa word for strong woman, iron woman. She spat you out on her fourth 9-month cycle around motherhood, right after the only boy announced himself, and before him, the daughter who is the opposite of her, and before the daughter, the firstborn, who came out still as they prodded and waited, but she remained hushed like the 3 a.m. morning she was pushed into. Even before the rooster's alarm, midwife Etta cupped her hands over your mother's wailing mouth, tender but firm. Quiet now, she warned. Let her go. You came 5 years after grief first struck your mother. You came out round like her, pillow cheeks, rolls for arms and legs, and the warmth many will come to covet. You are the Iron Woman's daughter, but at 20, you don't know this yet. You think you have no power, you own nothing, you don't stand out, you slink just a little out from the shadows. Every attempt at your liberation looks like an apology for being girl or African or colored. Even your voice is trained. You are trained. You come from the Iron Woman's household, and she isn't there to mold you. So you are just a wisp of her. Your slim waist, the envy of church mamas, grown and eye you, and you feel things you don't yet have a name for. You are book smart and pauper poor. At 20, George H.W. Bush launches his war that year. The Soviets dissolve their union. Clarence Thomas claws at Anita Hill, wounds her in Technicolor while we all watch. We lose Miles Dewey Davis III, but I Want to Sex You Up blares from the car radios. In your 20th year, you come across a photo of your mother, shiny eyes and face flawless, before the illness and departure. Sexy and stylish in a clingy sea green, she is there before you. It is Sunday morning. You are cleaning the drafty East Germantown row. moving to Mr. Robert Nesta Marley. There she goes with the pieces from my heart. The three of you are the only ones in the room. You and Bob and her. You and the Iron Woman face to face. A mirror, a sign, a warning, a reckoning, a requiem, a release. And a lot of what I'm going to read is just conjuring up the everyday folks that float around and in different experiences. This piece is called Our Brother, Holiday 1980s. One hand drags the 6-foot pine, the other is a frozen grip on a fragile paper bag housing 21 pounds of turkey, canned gravy, cranberries, and potatoes. He is our Hansel, trekking through the fresh snow, littering 12 blocks with needles and twigs. Daddy's pride would have starved us back then, but what guts, what grit one needs to seek and ask, to rummage for kindness among strangers. At that late hour, our brother accepts the half-thawed bird from Holy Soul's food cupboard and never reveals to them our shame. Cold and mocking oven, cut off by PGW, our improvisation with poverty, crock pots, kerosene heaters, two hot plates, bath water maker, body warmer, food cooker. Our brother is a wonder, a damp and scrawny hero he is, jollier than Saint Nick, 15-year-old wise man, holy harbinger, concealing a pack of cigarettes, whistling into the desolate night. He's a small bronze star in North Philly, bringing us Christmas. And I'm taking this one way back in time. Happy birthday, Dinah, late 1720s. Now, there's a series of poems I'm writing about a woman named Dinah who was enslaved in James Logan's household right here in Germantown. And there's no recorded birth date for her. You know how you read these stories and it just says there's no recorded birth date, but she saved the house. And I imagine that all of our ancestors had their birth dates. And I wanted to kind of capture that. Happy birthday, Dinah. Two of us waited by your mama's thigh, rubbed her belly and felt her walls grip and release. One of us parted her legs wide like a road opening and stood right dead in the center of her and peered into her dark tunnel and saw your crowning. We set ourselves in that leaning shack. We grounded ourselves to catch you, a ball of slick and slippery brownness you were, a thumping mass of hair and birthing scars you were. Don't let anyone tell you you have no born date. We were there. We witnessed your arriving. You came out calm as a river in June. Your mama yelped and cooed. We warmed our palms before we held you. Your mama would not let you go. She should have been born in another time. She didn't know how to let go of you. We encircled her and chanted away her sorrow. We three sisters warned, steal away, steal away, steal away home. She ain't got long to stay here. You were born before the sun tipped his hat. It was a Saturday and we wore white. Your mama's lip quivered when she asked if you were a boy or a girl. Her question vibrated that room, unstudying us. A boy will be seasoned into a workhorse. A girl will be bred soon she start to bleed. She's a girl, we told her. She's a girl. And something in her broke. We call that thing love, Dinah. It's black love. And sometimes looks like an easing river. Sometimes it's a tight ball of blood and wounds. You have people, Dinah. We waited near your mama's thighs. We held her feet in her hands. We warmed our palms before we caught you. And later, when you sprung up a bit and they came to snatch you from us, to give you to Miss Hannah like a play toy, we held our palms to our wet cheeks and felt your warmth fleeing. And to your weeping willow of a mama, we chanted our love song. We three sisters soothed her. Steal away, steal away, steal away home. She ain't had long to stay here. David's over there clapping me on. Thank you. And now just bringing it closer here, this one is called To All the Blocks I've Lived Before. So as I'm going through, I'm working, there's a series of poems. We moved about 14 times in my youth, okay? Just immigrant stories, you know. And this one is called North Philly, Tioga Street. Tioga was the first to break me, dried the wet from behind my ears, cut my teeth on her concrete, took that slack out my back, introduced herself when I was 8 years old and raised me. In the late 70s, early 90s, she was a scrappy girl, blue collar but classy. Back in the day, she wore her fake grass lined porches, hanging azalea baskets, mint green metal chairs. Then came the war on drugs. Then came crack. Then came Just Say No. Then came the war on us. But before then, Tioga held traditions and rituals, volleyball matches in the churchyard on Sundays, Cub Scouts and handouts, CYO dances, 4-H, and campfire girls. She introduced me to my first bullies, ducked insults for being wide nosed, dark, and foreign. Miss G told me, girl, keep that head high, skirt down, and legs closed. Tioga was a real steady girl back then. She grit me up, made me straighten and match wits, look people in the eye, taught me how to speak up. Don't ever shrink, she commanded. This hood block produced accountants, addicts, teachers, cops, doctors, and felons who all ended up leaving her. But she grabs hold of us from time to time and digs in deep. She is now a shell of herself, each porch holding a ghost of our past, reminding us of those early impressions, the ones that haunt and mark us, the ones that won't just rub away. I have just three more pieces to share with you. Feeling the energy in the room. Um, I'm going to read this piece called I'll Fly Away. And again, I'm into epigrams these days. So in the beginning, there's a quote, Albert Bromley's song, Some glad morning when this life is over, I'll fly away to a home on God's celestial shore, I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away when I die. I'll fly away, the immigrant song. We have stayed in this place for so long, we have erected markers for our dead. On stretches of lush lawns, split and hollowed, we weep and watch caskets shimmy down deep into the parted earth under a canopy of lilies and delphiniums and our tears. From dust we came, to dust we shall return. What to make of these hushed and swift mornings? A brief wake, a funeral, a burial without the rituals. Where are our family members shrouded in black and packed onto a bamboo mat? Where is the kola nut plate in the center? Where are the 5 a.m. scheduled cryings and bursts of wails and laments whenever a visitor stops by to greet and pay the mat fee? What about the cutting of hair and the tax levied if one insists on offering a strand and not their entire head, scraped bald as proof of devotion, a measure of how severely one is stricken with grief? What about the bath of sacred leaf water poured over the children and grandchildren for purification, for protection? For days, for weeks, the mat sitting is a system unto itself, an organized bossa world of heaving chests and undulating throats. One, there is a leader. Two, an assigner of duties. One will rise and cook. One will sweep and clean the yard. One will collect the money from the plate and go to the market. One would dust the house and keep a watchful eye for those too overcome and consumed, too numb to be moved. And in the end, after the dead is buried, before the mat is vacated, an elder will lead a meeting and demand that boyfriends marry the daughters of the family they've been courting or cohabitating with, and demand that brothers or aunties or fathers end their palaver, their commotion, their fuss making, and that all strife and bygones be buried there with the dead in the earth. Only then will the mat be rolled away until next time. In this cold place where we have managed to make a home for ourselves, some of us will not be laid to rest in the same dirt that birthed us. We are a scattered people. On foreign soils, our corpses are housed. But some glad morning, when this life is over, oh glory, we will fly away home. Okay, monuments to brown boys. The artist installed a mirror over the monument, and the people have come to gawk. Rubberneckers wonder what was there before. And you have come too, laying in the cut, statue still for seconds, your reflection edging off a 20-foot high bronze looking glass. You are an alluring hunk of stone, beguiling me. Yes, you, brown boy, rough cut monolith, I see you. You are a low slung jean wearing grandmother greeting pillar, an obelisk marking the entrance of your hood. You need to be somebody's memorial. And not only when you laid out and lowered in the dirt, a cold slab, your footstone, your pillow, a headrest, a marble headrest of past tense. He was, he once, he lived. No, you are now and present, alive and in color. And you need to be somebody's walking shrine, somebody's testament, somebody's tribute in this city. You have to be carved, stretched, and erect, a column to buttress boogeymen, the phantoms they say you imagine, the specters and goblins who told bullets and policies and laws that encase you. You need to be somebody's memento. Look how you beaming off that seeing glass. I'm catching your shine. Look at that swagger you carrying, hoodie wearing, fresh fade having, full teeth grinning. You need to be somebody's something to fight for, somebody's celebration, somebody's stone turned monument, carved and smooth, somebody's masterpiece in this here city. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. And I think I'll pass the mantle on to Mr. David Gaines. I appreciate this moment to share my poems.
Before David starts, I want to let everybody know that there will be an opportunity for questions and answer, a question and answer session after this. And thank you for that beautiful reading.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure.
Wow. Wow. Uh, I don't know if everyone knows how to do it, but if you can give just a round of applause, a virtual round of applause. That, whew, I feel very full from that, and it is an honor to be sharing this screen with you.
Thank you,
Um,
David.
I see I see why everyone lauds you the way that they do, because you truly deserve it.
Thank
Okay,
you. You're too kind.
uh,
Thank you.
thank you. So I'm gonna be reading a couple poems from my first debut book that just came out about 2 weeks ago, called Soft Boy. It's my
Yay.
baby, and yeah, I'm just gonna jump right in, and for the sake of time, some of these poems will be silly, some of these poems will be serious, but all these poems will be black. Um, so the first poem I'm going to read to you is called "The Show Must Go On." An acting teacher told me the worst thing an actor can do is break character. In high school, I punched a boy to impress some other boys. I earned their respect, a pitiful wage. I heard the boy cried himself to sleep that night. How jealous I am of his fatigue. Vulnerability is a dangerous stunt. To project is to make a double out of someone. I don't know how to cry, so I made him do it for me. I'm even violent in my sleep. I toss and turn, I jolt and kick. But what man hasn't spent a dark night heavy and restless under the weight of a role? I was cast at birth. My mother says, it's a boy. My father sharpens his knives, carves my family like a crescent moon. I once drove 20 miles. I once drove 20 miles in the wrong direction despite realizing it after the first 10. I couldn't accept my mistakes, so I just kept going. The greater the loss, the tighter the grip on what's left. Every man is a graveyard of stifled hurt and buried emotions, so there will always be more skeletons than men who admit to making them. I memorized the gendered script. auditioned as a real man and became understudy. In my relationships, I want to wear the pants, but they're high waters. I feel feminine in all the wrong places. I'm not afraid of being afraid, but I fear who I am if I'm not feared. My friends label me non threatening, and I swallow the compliment, despite it sitting in my stomach like a sour treason. And there I go again, typecasting myself, always playing the victim. There is no applause for what must be done. Some weeks after I made a boy weep, I walked into my study hall and another boy fixed his gaze on me. When it lingered past comfort, I asked, "Is there something in my teeth?" He replied, "My fist if you disrespect me again," and threatened me every time we crossed paths for months. I know he didn't really want to hurt me. He just wanted me to break. Thank you. All right. Yeah, a lot of the poems in this book and a lot of my work in general lately has just been dealing with performance. I grew up, I guess my sort of narrative is that I grew up in the church. You know, I was born and raised and groomed to be a pastor until I was like 12. Clearly, that didn't work out, right? So now I'm writing poems, and growing up in the church gave me this love and this understanding of performance that I've noticed in different areas. So this book really deals with the performative nature of gender, of so many aspects, specifically gender, and I use sort of my experience with masculinity to explore and kind of ask certain questions. So this next poem is called "When You Step on a Fresh Pair of Jordans." When you step on a fresh pair of Jordans, their owner will threaten to kill you, not for the misplaced heel. You can't unmake a stain, but if he can turn you into one, it'll ease the ache of knowing everything he loves can be ruined in an instant. I mean, we all got niggas who lost their freedom stepping on the toes of someone with the power to only wear sneakers by choice. And you can say sorry, but apologies won't bring redacted home or help his daughter pick out her shoes for school today. And haven't you also found warmth in this ice-veined country by fighting small, winnable battles? We all coping with some shit we couldn't control. So when their owner asks you to repent for having feet, only ever apologize for forgetting where you left them. That's it for that one. All right, yeah. All these poems are like real stories, by the way. I've really stepped on some Jordans in my lifetime. This next poem is the titular poem of the book. It's called "Soft Boy," and I'm gonna just jump right into it. Soft boy knows he's soft, but doesn't want you to think he's soft. Soft boy not like the other boys. Soft boy has feelings and no idea what to do with them. Soft boy sensitive. Soft boy cries. Soft boy wears sweaters and cuffs his jeans. Soft boy listens to Fleetwood Mac. Soft boy switches the biggie around his niggas. Soft boy is terrible at sports and being aggressive in general. Soft boy claims he ain't gay, but feels threatened around men more attractive than him. Soft boy cries. Soft boy reads books. Soft boy woke. Soft boy feminist. Soft boy says free the nipple so he can get a better view. Soft boy paints a picture of patriarchy, always landscape, never self-portrait. Soft boy wears a dress. Soft boy reinventing masculinity, or so soft boy says. Soft boy wolf in femme clothing. Soft boy evolved fuck boy. Soft boy cries. Soft boy likes your posts. Soft boy slides in your DMs respectfully. Soft boy doesn't fuck. Soft boy makes love. Soft boy loves the cuddle. Soft boy little spoon. Soft boy doesn't believe in labels. Soft boy ghosts you. Soft boy sorry. Soft boy has been going through it. Soft boy makes you feel guilty. Soft boy cries. Soft boy victim. Soft boy cries. Soft boy cries. Soft boy cries. Soft boy working on himself. Soft boy trying his best. Soft boy thinks his efforts enough. Soft boy thinks his softness enough. Thank you so much. Um, yeah, so many of these poems are just about one of my favorite things to do in art is just to juxtapose two seemingly contradictory things and just watch what chaos can come out of that. So This next poem is probably one of my favorites to perform. Um, it's called Roast of the Soft Boy, and it's after Eric D. Matthews, who is a phenomenal poet that I see reading in Philly all the time. I believe they're teaching at Bryn Mawr. Um, and yeah, I'm not going to preface this one. I need to drink a little bit of water first because yeah, I got to get in my bag. I will say this: performance also applies to sex, especially the hypersexuality that I think Black boys are expected to perform. Roast of the soft boy. Boy, you soft, wet, noodle having ass nigga. Limber timber having ass nigga. Whiskey dick when sober ass nigga. This has never happened to me before. When this happens every single time ass nigga. Thug in the streets, need a hug in the sheets ass nigga. Scared to come too fast, so you don't come at all ass nigga. Bedroom stage fright having ass nigga. I'm not a lover, I'm a performer ass nigga. Imposter dick drone having ass nigga. Rap name young impotence ass nigga. My anaconda don't want none unless I feel comfortable ass nigga. High sex drive, low self-esteem having ass nigga. Only thing you can trust is Jergens in your right hand ass nigga. Cialis might be for you ass nigga. Shame got you by the shaft ass nigga. Not hard enough ass nigga. Boy, you're soft. Real stories, all of these, real experiences. I think yeah, I'll just keep moving. I have this bad habit of over explaining poems, but I'm just gonna offer them to you, and you can kind of come to your own conclusions. So I'm gonna do two more. Yeah, this next one, I wanted to write a poem about my earliest memory, and the earliest memory I had was I had a pet fish who killed himself when I was like 6. That sounds tragic, but it's in hindsight, it's very hilarious. But apparently, if you don't filter your fish tank, appropriately, then your fish will suffocate. And so, my fish, who was black, in my opinion, had a choice to make as to whether he wanted to suffocate in his tank or venture outside of the tank and sort of find maybe an ocean existed out there in his mind. So I wrote this poem, and it's called Self-Portrait as My Dead Fish. um, and yeah, in my earliest memory I see you stiff on the cold floor, lifeless blue scales worn like they just sliced clean through a living room sky. Like they know home is where whatever you're surviving can't comfortably speak your name. And I too am tired of being loved by nowhere. I fell out my mama in 95, and all I've owned since is whatever oxygen my lungs could thieve. Like you, I didn't ask to be here, but I'm tasked with living, with swallowing every flake of truth my mistakes can conjure. What I'm trying to say is, I'm sorry. I'm still learning how to care for a living thing. Everyone talks of healing, but no one describes their healing as the anguished fall out of love or the demolition of a childhood home built on faulty concrete. I know one day I will also become the flushed dead, circling the drain of a loved one's memory. And still, I choose the slow suffocation of what I know over whatever freedom pools outside the familiar, and ain't that a poor origin story for manhood? Ain't that enough to make a boy leap outside himself and pray he lands in a fresher body of water? Thank you. I really appreciate y'all being here. And in case this is my only opportunity, I want to thank the organizers, especially Amanda and Fran, for being so great at putting all of this together. So yeah, for my last poem, I'm going to do one of my favorite pieces, and it's called Fine China. Um, I guess a sort of hypothetical question I want to ask you all is, how many of y'all grandmothers have china cabinets in their homes? and also how many of y'all have ever seen your grandmothers use that china cat that fine china in that cabinet. And if you can imagine that, which I'm assuming all the answers are never, um, that's sort of how I have been understanding masculinity as well. Um, in the sense that it boasts all of its utilities and all of the things it's able to provide the world without actually providing those things and actually being utilized most of the time. Fine china. I learned to be a man from the china cabinet in my grandmother's home, a porcelain patriarchy housed in his wooden body. My inheritance behind his tall glass face, passed down for so long, it feels like he's always been there. My grandmother says the fine china is for special occasions. This is one of her favorite lies. There is never an occasion that warrants him open or vulnerable. He's only there to impress guests. The dining room, his stage, he performs stability. Every man I know is a performer, more display than practice, or practicing some display learned from other men. My father tells me boys don't cross their legs, so I tell my brother the same. I tell my friends I've lost my virginity, and they tell me it's about time. I've lied about my number of sexual partners so often I forget the real amount. I'm most manly when I forget. My grandmother says, boy, you better not run around my fine china. You know, even she walks around him cautious. How easily breaking becomes another's burden. Fragile things take up the most space. My father believes a man should provide everything for his family except an apology. He taught me women love persistence. If you ask and she says no, it's only because you haven't asked enough. A woman taught me rejection, and I gave her the resentment that belonged to my father. When I asked my grandmother where all of this came from, she says the gold rimmed teacups came from a mother, and their twin saucers also from a mother, and the egg white plates painted with blue flowers from another mother. But we did not build the kiln that hardened you, rigid boy. So I ask, what does a man leave behind? And she says, nothing. Some nights, while my family sleeps, I imagine sneaking inside the dining room, grabbing the cabinet by his neck and throwing him to the floor. He shatters. I take off my father's shoes and walk barefoot through the glass. With each step, I hear a crunch beneath my feet that echoes his voice. He says, boys will be boys. So I tell him this is a mutiny of manhood. I paint my nails bright colors and cry for no reason. He says boys don't cry. So I sweat and purge his poison. I tell all my niggas I love them and they say it back. I sing a love song about a man and don't change the pronouns. He says, pause. So I move backwards. Rigor mortis before bitten dust. Breath before conception. And I hear my grandmother's uncaged laughter. Her joints say there is just too much time in the day. So we kick up our feet and rest. Thank you all so much for having me. Um, I love you. And I'm going to pass it along, I guess, to
Beautiful.
whoever's
Thank
next.
you. That was beautiful, David.
Thank you
I
so
love
much.
it. Beautiful. Ah,
Takes a little bit of time to process this, but that
yeah.
both of you were absolutely amazing. I mean, I can't
Thank
even
you.
begin to put into words. I knew this was going to be a wonderful evening, and you certainly did not disappoint. So,
Thank you.
Amanda, do you want to take over the Q&A?
Yes, I sure can. Thank you both so much. That was excellent.
Mm,
Okay,
mm.
so if we have any questions for our lovely poets, please put them into the Q&A for us or put them in the chat box and we will ask them some good questions about their work. Well, while we're waiting for people to sort of get their thoughts together, can you share a bit about either one of you or both? Can you share about when you started to write poetry, like how that process began, and when you really started to make this a part of your livelihood and your career?
Um, well, I don't mind starting. I started writing in like fifth grade, pretty much. But in terms of calling it a career, oh man, it took so long. I think first time I actually like got poetry, reading it out in front of people was I was at Temple, and I was in my 20s. But when I really started calling myself a writer or poet, it takes so long for us to really affirm that voice within ourselves. It's like you have something there, but you spend so much time and energy listening to everybody else's chatter. So by the time I honored that thing within me, I was in my early 30s. Like to say, oh, wow, I'm a poet, and I'm going to do this, because that was that journey for me. It wasn't a straight through, it was a whole lot of wasted energy thinking I wasn't enough.
Yeah, I think for me, I sort of had this um, ignorance surrounding what it meant to be a poet, and I think poets, there is this clout established for poets, or this, or just whenever you hear the word poet, or someone says I am a poet, whatever chord that strikes, poets demand respect, and I sort of always wanted that. So I think I was calling myself a poet much earlier than I actually began being a poet. But I think I got into poetry because my high school girlfriend, who I think was like my first real girlfriend, wrote me some poems, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna try this. And I tried it, and she said it was good, even though I'm sure she was just flattering me. And I kind of took that and ran. So from that moment on, you really couldn't tell me I wasn't the best writer in the world. And it wasn't until I think I got to college where I discovered slam and got really into slam poetry, which is definitely what raised me and what kind of grew me in my craft. It wasn't until I got there and started meeting other poets and other people who like loved poetry like more than I did, that I think
Mhm.
I was humbled, and I was like, wow, like this is not just about status or some sort of platform. This is about connection, human connection. This is about expression. This is about love. And that's when I sort of took it seriously. And I think from that point on, I was reading, I was writing, I was just entering open mics and just trying to be a part of the collective, um, love that is poetry. So I don't know if I answered the question, but that's
Perfect response from both of you. So we do have a few questions. So one of them says, "What is the best way to support and invest in your work?"
mm,
Reading, poetry. David touched on it. David, you are a gifted poet, by the way. So you did all those things right. Reading poetry. I always stress that I've had years of teaching artist experience, and I would say this to the students, to everybody: you have to read, not read to imitate style or imitate what people are doing, but not only reading poetry, but reading just a wide variety of things. Reading is essential. And then also the craft piece of it, going to workshops, participating. I did a high school group earlier today, and they were so shy to read their work. When you're given a platform, to have the courage, and I'm a relatively shy person, but to have the courage to be able to get out there and express. So reading, getting into workshops, honing your craft, and taking a chance on different styles. But the biggest thing is in really your authentic voice. So many times we try to sound like or be like other people. The purest way to really support this art and invest in yourself is to really cultivate your own voice, and also supporting other writers, sharing this platform. All of that comes full circle, and you are infinitely rewarded when you are more of a unselfish artist.
Absolutely, I definitely second that. Poetry to me is a communal art form, even more so than other ones. So I would say, obviously, reading is 100% necessary.
Mhm.
Um, in all the different ways that can happen. What makes reading, I think, easier is having a community to share those things with when you're really excited about something, or even like a book club. I have friends that I read with, and that just makes it more fun. I think that's a roadblock. I think a lot of like young writers get into, is that at a certain point, when it gets down to the craft stuff and like trying to get better, it's work, like it's
Mhm.
not all um not all of it is like just straight up passion and enthusiasm. And that's not to say that it's not worth it. Obviously, like this is probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, honestly, poetry. But I would definitely say finding like-minded people who
Mhm.
um you feel comfortable around, you feel safe around, who love you, and don't just love your craft, right? But love you as a person, love the place
Mhm.
that the poetry comes from. And that will, I think, naturally motivate you to become better, simply from the fact that um, you have other people who are encouraging and who believe in you. So our community is a big part. And I also want to just expand a little bit more on the writing thing, because I think we don't really know just how much writing is we encounter on a day to day, even and especially being within a quarantine space. Um, when you're watching a movie or a television show, you're experiencing writing.
Mhm.
When you're scrolling on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, post on Instagram and try to write a caption and tell me that's not some writing necessarily. So I would say, honestly, really paying attention to the way that writing manifests in your day-to-day life, and understanding, like, obviously not all writing is necessarily quote unquote poetic, but seeing the ways that poetry can become a part of your day-to-day process, and like the practice of writing in general, even if it's not poetry, can be a part of your day-to-day process, even if that's journaling, something that no one else sees, which I do recommend, by the way. That was one of my biggest mistakes, was early on. I In my writing career, everything I wrote I had to share. If it, to me, it was a waste if it wasn't being shared. And now I think it's much healthier for me, and I would recommend this as well for other people, to just write things, practice just getting things down, whether or not it's perfect enough to share, or anything like that. Just get it down for yourself, and I think that might alleviate some of the, at least for me, some of the perfectionism that can come with growing in anything. So.
So we have not a question, but I just want to read it. I am just in awe of how naked both of you are in your art. It's a gift to be able to share yourself in that way. Thank you so much for sharing your gift with us. Then we have another
Welcome. Thank
question.
you.
Absolutely. Thank you
We
for
have
that.
another question. How can we buy your book? I did put the link in there for Uncle Bobby's, but I know it's on Amazon. But are there any other ways that people should shop to get your book?
Um, Yeah, I think the Uncle Bobby's link is perfect. It's available through my website. Signed copies are available on the website, and the ebooks are available on the website as well. Those are those are the best ways to get in contact with it. And I appreciate anybody who wants to read it, because it's my first book, and I'm still like getting used to the fact that
Congratulations.
people
It's a
can.
beautiful book.
Yes.
The
Thank
look of
you.
it, the poems in there, the poems you read, absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
Congrats. Yeah.
I'm gonna soak all that in. But yes, those are
Soak it
the.
in, soak
Soak
it
it
in.
in. Yes, the
It's you
time.
just it's well
Definitely
deserved.
Thank
Yeah,
beautiful.
you for
Well
well
asking.
deserved.
deserved.
First book, like pub
Yeah,
day is like the best day,
yeah.
right? So such Trapita, can we talk about like the healing verse poetry?
Mm,
Oh yeah, yeah, we can. So the Healing Verse Philly poetry line, it's a toll-free phone line that's in the city that you can call every Monday. There's a new poet feature who's writing sort of like a love letter or a healing verse to the city. And it's grounded in a mental health, well-being, and wellness. It's supposed to be an affirming, inspirational message. And David mentioned Era D. Matthews, and she's actually featured this week on the
hey.
poetry line with a beautiful piece, Ecstatic Black Gold, she has on there. So the line is 1-855 Poem RX2. And I did send a little link to that. To the graphic. So 1855 Poem RX2, like almost like prescription RX. And if you call that healing verse line, you'll hear this week's poet. And every Monday we change the poet. It's going to go through all the way through 2020. Oh, great. Thank you. So it's just 1855, not home, but 1855 Poem RX2. So I'll put that in there. Um, that's the healing verse line. So give it a call, obviously, when you're off of this call, and check it out. Wanted to just make home accessible, and there are a lot of us during this time that we can't just get on the computer, get on Zoom, but a lot of people can get on the phone. I'm also going to be doing a number of workshops with the public in general, but also like social service agencies, youth programs, youth shelters, homeless shelters, to get them to create their pieces. And that's going to be a public art installation at the end of this project. So 1855 Poem RX2. Check it out.
And I can attest, it is a great experience. Poetry has never been that. You can do this anywhere. It's a part of my morning routine, actually. So
Wonderful. And you'll be on there
definitely
soon,
check it out.
David. So,
Looking
somebody
forward
put the
to it.
number in 1-855-763-6792. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Great. I think we do have some more questions here. Great. It said, what moves you as an artist? Are there any unconventional slash surprising things that have inspired you to write?
Want to take that, David?
Yeah, sure. It's tough because there's so many things that move me. Um, if I had to narrow it down, I'd say I would say I would say contradiction,
Mm,
or hypocrisy is the more charged word, but
mhm, mhm,
really what that just means to me is the tension between um, two two contradicting truths. Um, like sort of like cognitive dissonance, things like that. I think the reason why that gets me is obviously like coming and raised from the church. I've always been fascinated with people who like don't practice what they preach, and the fact that that's an idiom itself like kind of tells you
mm,
all you need to know. But and it pops up in so many ways. Like for example, the first poem I shared today, I actually wrote after watching um I was watching a lot of Heath Ledger movies, and specifically the one I had just saw was Brokeback Mountain, and obviously like the queerness, and it just made me cry. But it started. I like research after every movie I watch. I research everything about it, and so I'm looking things up, and I'm reading about Heath Ledger's death, and apparently he received a call from his sister, um,
mm,
like a few days before he overdosed. And sorry, I should give a content warning before I bring any of this up. Sorry about that. Uh, and he told her, she kind of warned him like, hey, I don't think you should be mixing these pills with this, and da, da, da. And he told her like, I'm fine, like I'm okay. And to me, despite very much not being okay, and it brought up all these feelings in me of like how often do especially men just flat out um, lie um,
mm,
to cover up, or like to protect, or to pretend. And to me, that's sort of what I mean when I say contradiction. Like we contradict ourselves in order to sort of try to manipulate the world around us, and even not even in a negative way, like to protect ourselves sometimes, or just for safety. And that's honestly what inspires me a lot of the times, is like, wow, it's amazing what human beings will do to um, to survive in their own way.
mhm.
Um, yeah, sorry, that was sort of a long-winded, convoluted answer, but
No, but
yeah.
I get it
No, that was great.
totally.
Mm,
Yeah, I think for me it's void and erasure. So
mm,
for me, I'm motivated because often these stories are not heard. These stories are not included. The things you're talking about, David, some of the things that I'm talking about, those little moments of joy as well as sorrow or celebration. And we talk about Black diasporic poetry and people, and sometimes our stories are just not given the space and the breadth in the room. So that's what compels me to be able to make sure, and that who knows, and I don't necessarily have all the perspective, but at least, in our own little ways, we're trying to make this happen. So I'm grateful for this platform, to you and also to Fran for writing that amazing grant and getting it, and being able to have us here this evening. So these are ways that we uplift these voices that are often left, out of the off to the side.
Absolutely.
That's true. And then we have our last question before we wrap up. As someone said, I've been out of the poetry scene for a while, and you've mentioned the poetry community. Any groups that you recommend, and if there are any virtual ones that you recommend?
Mm. Well, I'm always gonna shout out the Philly Pigeon. Those
Yes.
the organizers there are very good friends of mine, and they were also the first people in the Philly poetry scene to really kind of welcome me and like give me a space to like just be myself. So definitely shout out to them. They had their their last like season, their slam season was virtual. So I'm assuming they're also going to have another virtual season in 2021. I would definitely check them out because the community space that they have is very much very safe. As much as safe space can exist, they do a good job with that. Outside of that, though, I'm going to be honest. Um, I'm not very aware of what organizations have made the transition to virtual spaces. I
Yeah,
would,
Blue Stoop has Blue
yes, yeah.
Stoop. So I don't know if it's all poetry necessarily, but I know that they do have writing
Mhm,
workshops. There's a fee, but there's scholarships, so it
mhm.
can be zero. So Blue Stoop is another one too that I know of
Absolutely.
recently. Yeah,
That's actually a little embarrassing because I'm running one of those workshops in
I
April.
saw you on
So,
there. It's not
there
embarrassing.
we
We got a
go.
lot of stuff on
Yeah,
our mind.
that's very true, very true. Yeah, definitely check out Blue Stoop. They're doing incredible things as well. Let me think about this a little bit.
Yeah, and when we get off of this call, we'll think of a million other
Exactly,
things.
right.
Yeah, it's kind of hard in the moment.
That's
But I
how
think you could do like a search of like Philly poetry groups in terms of readings and things. The free library, they have the
Mhm.
Monday poetry series, Philadelphia, Free Library of Philly. So there's so many things happening in a virtual space now. I just can't remember all of it.
Yeah, I would say also don't be afraid to reach out to any poets that you follow on social
Mhm.
media. I think that's the beautiful thing about social media. It kind of makes people more accessible. Obviously, like don't harass anyone, but if you're interested in a community and you see someone who is a part of that, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be willing to share that information as well.
No, that's great. Okay, this was our last question. And I think we're just gonna wrap up for the night. Is there anything else you would like to share before we wrap up with the audience? If there's any other publicity that you have coming up, any events that you want them to come to?
I have nothing to
Go ahead,
plug.
David.
I just want to. Oh no, please go first.
No, you go. I'm good.
I just wanted to say thank y'all for spending your Wednesday night with poetry. I think poetry has never, at least for me, like felt as like in the midst of everything that's going on. It's really hard to hear poems and be like, oh, this is important and urgent and necessary. But it really is. It so is. And it makes my heart and it encourages me so much to see people who still give their time and energy and resources to spaces like this and supporting spaces like this because they are very much important. And just thank you.
David, I'm with you on that. Nothing to plug really at all, except buy David's book. Um, I know, and they also gave my website. So there's a CD I have with Monette Sutler called "This Is How We Get Through." So check that out. Um, Want to thank Amanda again and Fran. This was a really, if anything that could have happened this week, the fact that I get to share this virtual stage with David is an honor. So thank you all. And then thank you all for listening. The people that
Mhm.
are on here, we can't see you, but we feel you. and we can hear see your comments as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So much for your time. I just want to mention that we do have some artwork and some poetry that we have collected throughout this series. That information will be available on the library website under events. I'm going to post it there. So if you want to see the full expression of that artwork and the poetry that we have, please take a look out for that. And it will go into the student newsletter. So thank you so much for coming tonight. We appreciate it. Thank you for coming to all of the events that we had throughout
Yes.
the year. We really do
Yes.
appreciate it. It was grant funded and we wanted to spend the money with the Black community, especially our Black poets. So thank you so much for coming and being supportive and just being your awesome self. So everyone have a great night and
Yes.
we'll
Be
hopefully see
safe.
you again soon. Be safe.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, David.
Thank you all
Bye.
We'll
so very
connect soon.
much.
Yeah, everyone's great
All
meeting
Please.
right.
you all.
We'll connect soon. Bye bye.
Yes. Bye bye.